I'm Nancy Cavey, National Arrest and Individual Disability Attorney. Welcome to Winning Isn't Easy. Before we get started, I've got to give you a legal disclaimer. This podcast isn't legal advice. The Florida Bar Association says I have to tell you that. And now that I've told you that this isn't legal advice, nothing will prevent me from giving you an easy to understand overview of the disability insurance world, the games that disability carriers play, and what you need to know to get the disability benefits you deserve. So off we go. Now today we're going to dive into a topic that affects millions of working women, but it's often misunderstood, overlooked, and mishandled by employers and insurance companies alike: pregnancy and short-term disability. Now, for many, pregnancy is a joyful and transformative time, but it can also come with serious medical complications, doctor-ordered bed rest, and a recovery period that makes returning to work right away impossible. And that's where short-term disability insurance is supposed to step in, to offer financial protection when you're temporarily unable to work due to pregnancy-related conditions. But if you've ever tried to file a short-term disability claim during pregnancy, you may already know it's not always smooth sailing. From confusing policy language and waiting periods to claims denial and employer pushback, the process can be overwhelming, especially when you're trying to focus on your health and your baby. In today's episode, I'm going to walk you through everything you need to know about pregnancy and short-term disability, what qualifies, how is short-term disability different than long-term disability, when should you seek legal help, what happens if your claim is denied. So if you're pregnant or planning to become pregnant and wondering how to protect your paycheck, this episode is for you. So let's get going. I'm going to talk about 1, understanding short-term disability in pregnancy; 2, filing and protecting your pregnancy-related disability claim; and 3, knowing your rights and seeking support. We're going to take a quick break before we get into this episode.
Have you been robbed of your peace of mind by your disability insurance carrier? You owe it to yourself to get a copy of Robbed of Your Peace of Mind, which provides you with everything you need to know about the long-term disability claims process. Request your free copy of the book at caveylaw.com today.
Welcome back to Winning Isn't Easy. Understanding short-term disability in pregnancy. Let's start out by talking about what short-term disability is and how it's different than long-term disability. So short-term disability, STD, provides partial income replacement when you're temporarily unable to work due to a non-work-related illness, injury, or medical condition, including pregnancy. Generally, most short-term disability policies or plans will exclude payment for workers' comp type situations where you've been injured on the job. Or have an aggravation or acceleration of a condition as a result of workplace conditions. So let's distinguish that first from workers' comp, and then let's talk about short-term disability. Now, in the terms of short-term disability, it can last for a few weeks or a few months, depending on the terms of your policy. There are some employers who are self-fund short-term disability. So they will actually pay it out of their own coffers, if you will, and they will self-administer the short-term disability. And that's basically called self-funded. Now, there's another scenario where the employer will self-fund the short-term disability and will have a third-party administrator administer the claim. And then, of course, there's a short-term disability policy where the employer has offered to you a short-term disability policy or plan. And in each of those instances, you are going to see generally the same kinds of games that are played that we'll talk about in a minute. Now, what's long-term disability? That's an extended income replacement for conditions that generally will last longer than the short-term disability period. Generally, as I've said, in short-term disability, you will see the payment of benefits anywhere from 3 months to 6 months, though I've seen them as long as a year. Once you complete your short-term disability benefits and you're eligible for long-term disability, the policy will have generally 2 different definitions of long-term disability. One is an inability to do your own occupation, and normally that's paid for 1 to 2 years. Then after that point in time, the definition of long-term disability will switch from an inability to do your own occupation to an inability to do any occupation by virtue of your medical condition, your education, and training. So potentially you can move through short-term to long-term disability. Now, in the context of pregnancy, most short-term disabilities benefits will cover both pre-delivery complications and post-delivery recovery. But there is no uniform policy or plan, and so each is different. You need to understand that there are some common benefits, but again, I would strongly suggest that if you're thinking about getting pregnant or you are pregnant and beginning to have complications, that you get out that policy or plan so you understand what the benefits are that are going to be provided. So let's talk about common benefit periods. Normally, they will pay short-term disability benefits for 6 weeks after a vaginal birth, 8 weeks following a C-section, and generally they will offer additional time for complications or medically required bed rest. Again, it just really depends on your policy's coverage terms, the waiting periods, exclusions, and especially if you're newly enrolled or recently become pregnant, because we're going to talk about something that's known as the pre-existing condition clause that is used to limit the payment or actually exclude the payment of benefits because of pregnancy. So who qualifies for short-term disability and what conditions are covered? Pregnancy obviously is one of the most common reasons for filing a short-term disability claim, but it's far from the only qualifying conditions. Now, short-term disability policies will typically cover a range of temporary medical situations, including high-risk pregnancy and complications like gestational diabetes or preeclampsia. I had those in my first pregnancy and was on physician-ordered bed rest too. So those are common complications that you will see, but you also might have issues with recovery from childbirth, both C-section and vaginally. You might also suffer from postpartum depression or anxiety. You also might have, in a non-pregnancy situation, medical conditions that result in you being disabled and unable to work because of an acute illness, such as severe flu or pneumonia. You might have musculoskeletal injuries or pain limiting your abilities. You might have undergone surgery and are recovering from surgery. So those are sort of the waterfront of some of the conditions that can be the basis of a short-term disability claim. Generally, though, you have to be under the regular care of a licensed medical provider and provide documentation supporting your inability to work. Now, I alluded to the fact that most disability policies will have some policy limitations. And one of the things that you need to understand is the pre-existing condition clause. And I have litigated this issue before in federal court. And so let me give you the rough story of this particular client. She had become newly enrolled with her employer's short-term disability plan. And there was in this plan a look-back period that says, look, literally, if you become disabled as a result of a pre-existing condition for which you received treatment before you became enrolled in this program, we're going to look back at your medical records and see whether you got treatment for this medical condition. And if so, we're most likely going to deny any complications or problems that you have under the pre-existing condition clause because you're newly enrolled in this short-term disability plan. Now, in this particular case, my client was pregnant at the time she enrolled in her employer's short-term disability plan. And of course, if you look back, she got treatment for her pregnancy, but that wasn't the problem. Post-delivery, she had episodes of preeclampsia and also issues with hemorrhaging. Subsequently, she had a stroke, and the disability carrier said, oh, look, this is all the result of the pregnancy. And certainly the hemorrhaging was, but that wasn't the cause of the stroke. And as a result, the carrier denied the claim. Ultimately, the case ended up in the 11th Circuit, and the judges took judicial notice of strokes and what could cause strokes, and basically said, in terms of time, the onset of this stroke was not temporally or time related to the pregnancy. And yes, we understand she got treatment for the pregnancy. We understand that that was a pre-existing condition, but that is not what caused the stroke in this particular case. So again, when you enroll in your short-term disability plan or policy, can impact the extent and nature of the coverage that you might have as a result of any complications for pregnancy, or just a natural recovery period for pregnancy. Got it? Let's take a break.